Thanks for joining us for another episode of The Ghost Furnace. I am Bond, and I'm here with my cohort, Nick Pennsylvania. How you doing, Nick?
Doing real good. Happy to see you.
Absolutely, yeah. It's been a hot minute. As you all know, we've been a little inconsistent with our episodes the last few weeks, but that is not because we have been idle. We have had a lot going on in life, and we have had a lot going on actually in the podcast realm. And unfortunately, we only have so many hours in a day. So what we kind of wanted to do was hop on real quick and just kind of go over a few things that we've been working on, touch on some of the previous episodes, give you guys a little bit of a preview of some of the things that we're working on that we kind of, have in the hopper and are excited to be sharing with you guys as we get into, this autumnal season that we're steadily approaching. So what we kind of wanted to talk about this evening was a few kind of little things, and one of those was we had Brendan Storr on a few weeks ago to go over his book, A Strange Little Place, about Reykjavik, and due to some scheduling difficulties, Nick wasn't able to join us for that conversation, which I know he was really bummed about. So was Brendan.
I really was.
But
yeah. Especially in the wake. I got to listen to the episode.
Mm-hmm.
Did you say it's about Reykjavik?
Revelstoke.
Revelstoke. Yeah. British Columbia.
Not Reykjavik.
Not Reykjavik. Yeah. Well, awesome name for a town.
Yeah,
and it's one of the things when I was listening to him talk about the wild days of the town,
mm-hmm.
It reminds me, of course, here in Western Pennsylvania, there are a lot of lumber and especially the oil towns. And they have this same sort of like wild story of violence and turmoil. Exactly.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But where the lumber towns, or rather where here the oil towns were kind of died out by the 1910s, and the
mm-hmm.
lumber towns were pretty much done. I mean, there are still some lumber towns, but not in the old sense. Those were pretty well done by World War II. So it's just really wild to hear of a town that really was like that until like the 70s and 80s and everything.
Relatively recently. Yeah.
Relatively recently.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there were a lot of like little things that made me think like he almost had this old time life. He talks about like the family grocery store that they had.
Yeah.
So much cool stuff. What were you going to say there? Something.
I think the setting was so interesting for that book. And for those of you who haven't read it, again, it's called A Strange Little Place. Go out and pick up the second edition of it. The thing that really stuck with me about that book, like you said, with the setting, is how it compares to especially other, I was thinking like bigger towns.
Yeah.
Like it follows a lot of like the Rust Belt stuff out here on the East Coast. Like when he would talk about like the, rundown industrial centers that were trying to, make a go of it again every X amount of years in these cycles of investment and kind of people leaving. You could, I like it. It was very easy to picture what this place looked like without ever actually kind of being there. And by proxy, kind of understanding the people, because he talked about how, it was kind of a wild and woolly place, but then you also have like this, I don't want to say cosmopolitan element, but very modern element that's
like when they were talking about some of the things that they were selling in the grocery store.
Right. Exactly. Everything. Yeah. And I think that's an interesting juxtaposition that really rings true, because when you go to a lot of these smaller cities in the Rust Belt, they often have those elements,
I won't soon forget being in the middle of West Virginia and
mm-hmm.
and having drinks. I spent a week in this little town, a little college town in West Virginia, had a great time, but I'm speaking to, this is better part of 20 years ago. I'm in an old ice house bar and talking to a somewhat flamboyant guy who is a professor of poetry and is like one of the leading experts
mm-hmm.
on Sylvia Plath, has like
that's cool. Okay.
Well, and then the woman on the other side, her parents, her father worked for like a major banking, like international
mm-hmm.
banking thing. But her parents were illegally married because in the Commonwealth of Virginia, where they were married, you couldn't have interracial marriage. So, okay, this is
Oh,
one small town in West Virginia, and I
yeah.
was thinking at that time, like this kind of busts up a lot of people's ideas. And I
Hmm.
always like when people surprise you like that.
Right.
And when towns do it as well. And whenever you go to a tourist town or a small town in a tourist area, it's, interesting to remind yourself, like, hey, I'm here on vacation, but somebody
Hmm.
else is looking in a mirror, also brushing their teeth and thinking about like the really mundane things that they have to do
Hmm.
here.
Hmm.
And that kind of happened regionally with the town that I used to live in right
Right.
around here. It became very uh touristy is not exactly the right word, but it became one of those like, oh, there's this really cute place in the immediate area. We should,
Hmm.
and that was weird. That was
Hmm.
weird. So
Well,
it made me think about a lot of these things.
right. And when Brennan talks about like the historic houses and everything and the town square, which again we didn't, it's funny for how much of that is in the book. We didn't talk about it a ton on the in the interview, but like the town really has like kind of like embraced a lot of its history and everything. And it's cool because a lot of historic houses, much like towns around here, you have these historic houses that people still live in. So
Oh, absolutely.
so they're like part museum, part like residence, and like I think from like a paranormal standpoint, that's just like a fun setting because it shows that like again, things are always moving and changing, and it adds a realness to them that is like obviously not like staged, I guess. Like it just has a good
Yeah.
vibe to it.
The town is definitely the main character of the book. And the
Yeah.
second maybe is that building he was living in.
Yeah.
When he talks
Yeah.
about that, like, and I think so many times you've lived in a few places. I've
Mm-hmm.
lived in a bunch of places. Sometimes there's just this like little, I think it's really made more common that there's just a spot space you
Yeah.
don't know you can't really do anything with it. No matter what you try to do,
Yeah.
you just find yourself, oh, I never go in that space.
Mm-hmm.
Or I only go through it to get somewhere else. And yeah, and in retrospect, looking back on that and feeling like, oh, that was an important spot for some reason.
For some reason. And again, it's because there's obviously like the design element. Like, we've all been in houses that have spaces that are absolutely form over function, and that can almost be a little like we've talked about how that's not like say unsettling, but kind of like annoying when you're living in a place like that. But when he was talking about that room and how like him and then other tenants tried so many different things to like make it work, it wasn't like the room had like a weird structure to it. It wasn't like there was anything, you know, physically strange about the room. It was very much it had to do with something about the vibe with the space, whatever energy was in there, or however it was being utilized, or whatever people were perceiving about it, just like wasn't clicking one way or the other. And that was
Yeah.
interesting.
I mean, the bottom line was the whole conversation was really
Hmm.
interesting to me. He was a really engaging and interesting
Oh
guy
yeah.
to listen to. You couldn't not like him. And we had already rescheduled once, and it was probably because of me, I think. And I was like, you gotta see if you can get somebody else on or just do it
Yeah.
solo because
Yeah.
I didn't want to keep like, but I
Right.
hope he comes back on, and for no other reason than to talk to him. I get the
Yeah.
opportunity to talk to him for the first time, and it would be nice to have somebody that sounds more Canadian than I do because I've been accused of that.
Yeah. No, yeah. Like 10 out of 10, like such a fun conversation. And it's not often that you talk to someone after like listening to them and reading their book and everything, and you just like almost like pick up, like that. It was just, yeah,
Yeah.
that was such a refreshing conversation. Great
Well,
dude.
and another conversation. Now, this is one of the reasons why we haven't been here and on lately.
Right.
Recently, we got a thing we are really excited about that
Mm-hmm.
we want to plug. We were reached out to, and we had this really wonderful conversation. It was basically Brendan and I going through a lot of the hits about Pennsylvania stories in particular. Do you want to tell the people what's coming up?
Yeah, so unfortunately, this episode probably won't come out until later in October, but we got to have a really fantastic conversation with our new friend Christian Alexanderson, who is the host of the podcast Hemlocks to Hellbenders, which I've been listening to since probably his first, 3 or 4 episodes. Because again, for those of you based in Pennsylvania, you'll know that that is our state tree and our state I guess it would be technically our amphibian.
It is an amphibian.
Yeah, but is it state amphibian or is it state like amphibian slash reptile? I'm not
I
sure.
mean, the bottom line
Um,
is it's official.
it's official. Yeah, it is state
It is part of
recognized.
the iconography of
Yes,
Pennsylvania.
yes. But like you guys know how when you see something, whether it's like an ad or just something you run into in the wild, where you're just like, okay, I am the target audience for this thing. Like it's got me
Yeah.
pegged. That's how I felt when I saw the logo for Hemlocks to Hellbenders. I was like, ah, gosh, like whatever this is, I'm probably going to be real into it. And I was not surprised, but I was pleasantly rewarded with a fantastic podcast.
Well,
Um,
and you told me listen to this, so
mhm,
I did, and I was listening to his most recent
mhm.
episode where he's interviewing one of the staff from the Pennsylvania Lumber Museum, and every single person I talked to, be it you, be
Yes.
it when we were talking with
Yeah.
him, says like that museum is a world-class
Hmm.
museum. It really is. You think you're gonna walk in, you're gonna spend an hour.
Yeah.
No, you spend an hour in the vestibule.
Right.
It reminds me a totally different reason, but there's a right outside of Williamsport
Hmm.
here in Pennsylvania. There's Clyde Peeling's reptile place, which is just another like
Yeah.
really amazing place. And
Hmm.
so yeah, we've talked a lot about Pennsylvania stuff here. This is not a Pennsylvania exclusive thing because of course we've
Yes.
had interviews from Hawaii
Right.
and all over the country in British Columbia now,
Hmm.
but the Pennsylvania stuff shines through in a lot because we really do talk an awful lot about in our backyard. And I guess he
Right. That's
heard
why I
that
think.
and thought,
Yeah.
oh, okay. So
Yeah.
we're the Halloween episode,
Hmm.
is my understanding.
Yes. Yeah. And it was a lot of fun because, as you all know, normally we're on this end of the interview process. We're not the ones kind of being interviewed as much. We took a lot of effort to make sure that we were prepared and everything. And we really wanted to do we just wanted to do a good job for him. And because it is such a great podcast. And when Nick said like we hit the highlights, like we did the greatest hits, that's absolutely what we did. And it was just a lot of fun because we got to talk about everything from Bigfoot to ghosts to UFOs to other cryptids. We
Why I
talked,
think lake monsters are like
yeah,
mascots.
yeah. It was just a really fun conversation because like we talk about a lot on this show, like a lot of this folklore and a lot of these things serve multiple purposes. And I think the reason that Christian kind of connected with us so much is that like his podcast again, Hemlocks to Hellbenders, is mainly about the PA parks and forests and kind of like the outdoor industry in our state. So he interviews park directors, environmental education specialists, people who run you know like minority group birding associations. Like it's all about people kind of getting outside and enjoying what like Pennsylvania has to offer. We kind of talked a lot about how folklore and these stories teach us about our culture and our society, and they get us out into these places and they make people make connections with the world around them. And that's one of the really wonderful things about talking about things that we do. Um, I would have never been to Kecksburg if it wasn't for the Kecksburg UFO crash.
Right.
Um, like you think of how many places that we've gone that we normally wouldn't have gone because of these stories. And now whether that is kids legend tripping and going to a insert your random crybaby bridge or haunted railroad tracks or spooky forest, or it's people doing like legitimate ghost investigations at historic places, or whether it's Bigfoot research is going out and, call blasting or whatever. These are all things that make you really enjoy the natural world, I think, in a lot of cases. Then it really makes people learn about history, which, as you guys all know, is a big selling point for everything for us. And that's something that Christian really ends up talking about a lot. And again, especially in the PA Lumber episode, but in a lot of his other ones, talking about how there is this history all around us that we just literally drive by all the time and don't ask or don't look into. And if you just kind of go below the surface, just like a lot of the stories that we talk about on here, if you just go one layer deeper than what you're normally doing, it's shocking and pleasantly surprising what you can find.
No, I really feel like Kindred Spirit had a
Mm-hmm.
really great natural conversation with them. We had been going back and forth for a couple weeks, and again, no, it's not going to come out till right around Halloween, but
Mm-hmm.
look forward to that. And in the meantime, when you're done listening to us, give a listen because again, especially if you're in Pennsylvania or a
Yeah.
bordering state, even if you're not, he has some really interesting things. Because like the PA Lumber Museum, it's just an interesting story. It's an interesting era, and
Mm-hmm.
if you find yourself traveling through, why not?
Right. And and again, the PA Lumber Museum, like I said, fantastic museum. It is a great place to go ask some people about Wampus cats and squonks and Bigfoot.
And
Because
directions.
and directions. Because like they get those questions all the time. And like again, those are our type of people typically. Like you said, like lots of kindred spirits in that sense.
So speaking of kindred spirits,
Mm-hmm,
and a long build up to this, so I have, well, a few weeks ago, I reached out to you about a thing,
mm-hmm.
and I did so in part to tell you, like, I assure you this is not me, because it definitely sounds like something I would do. So this is a current happening thing. It's only been
Mm-hmm,
happening for maybe 10 years at the
mm-hmm.
most. So, one of the great, speaking of Pennsylvania words that a lot of outsiders struggle with is Schuylkill. Schuylkill.
Google.
And the Schuylkill Notes in particular. So, right now, there have been around 150,
Mm-hmm,
maybe by this point, 200 some notes. And these are being found not just in the woods, which I believe is where many are seen along a lot of the hiking trails, like the Appalachian Trail runs through
mm-hmm.
Pennsylvania. There is the North Country Trail that runs just a few miles from both of us. So they've been found along hiking trails. They've been found in state parks. They're hanging from trees or on bridge rails and everything. They are these weird notes. And the one of the weirder things is that people finding them are claiming that they're opening food packages like cereal boxes
And
and
find,
finding
yeah.
these notes stuffed in there. And again, so I will explain really briefly. Like I will do weird things like occasion. Okay, I worked in an office for years.
Mm-hmm.
Every morning there was a cleaning woman and she read the paper every morning before she came to work and she would leave me the crossword puzzle and crypto quote. And I would usually get through
Yeah.
the one of the two crossword puzzles, not the New York Times. I'm a solid and dependable Wednesday New York Times guy, but the bottom line is I would do my crossword puzzle, then I would do the crypto quote. I would
Mm-hmm.
decipher the crypto quote successfully 9 times out of 10. I'm not bragging, but this is one of my strengths. I'm so bad at so many things, but this is one of where I'm strong. I would take that crypto quote and I would go to my dictionary on my desk and I would replace every noun in the crypto quote with the sixth noun that would precede it in my dictionary. And then I would take maybe 10 or 20 postcards because I was collecting postcards at the
Mm-hmm.
time. And I would write this new quote on the back of the postcard, and I might mail it to every single person on a street saying Coudersport, Pennsylvania. Just I've not done anything illegal. I've done this
Yeah.
consciousness expanding hijinks, or
Yeah.
what I like to refer to it as. But one day, some street in some small town in Pennsylvania, every house would get a very weird postcard. And I hope that it established a sense of community. So I did this for years. It was, and I never get to
Well,
see what fun it
yeah.
created, but
Right,
yeah.
right. And well, and because like that kind of stuff, and again, we're gonna get into these Schuylkill notes,
Yeah.
but like whenever I first heard about them and what you're talking about, it almost sounds like performance art, like kind of something like between like the Toynbee tiles and like street art.
Yes.
It's like that's what I thought the Schuylkill notes were at first. Was like it's like, oh, this is some sort of like performance art piece, but somewhere in that fun little zone in between.
Yeah. Now these are most often being found in central Pennsylvania and in northeastern Pennsylvania, like the Pocono area.
Hmm.
Really just kind of the wilds. But yeah, it's really weird. So the notes themselves, I'm pulling one up. They are just word salad.
Hmm.
Word salad, but there's a lot of things that are, long
Unsavory.
skulls, eyes, arch it. There's a lot of things that are like leading towards some more known conspiracy theories and everything.
Yeah.
Skull and Bones is mentioned in there. And like, listen, this is even more like why I'm like, okay, I want you to know, Brendan, this is not me
This is
putting them
not.
out
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's just really Skippy, Folgers, and the Jesuits, Oprah, Bush. Like it's word salad, but there's a lot of things that again are hinting towards pretty well-known conspiracy theories. So the very first notes, there's some debate because
Hmm.
again, this is still an ongoing thing.
Hmm.
The first notes are debated to have started between 2015 in 2019. Now, they are generally just a few, usually not much
Hmm.
more than 3 inches long. They're
Hmm.
folded, they're in a plastic bag
Plastic bags.
typically.
Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah, narrow type. And again, it's all caps. Folgers, they drop the E. But yeah, there's just a
So it
lot.
seems like cryptographic stuff is what I've always heard is that like it's not
Yeah.
like the words that are on there aren't like are meant to just be kind of inflammatory, but there's actually like a code hidden in it and like
Well, even when you say
yeah.
names, like specific names, like you say, okay, some of the names that appear are Oprah Winfrey, Elon Musk, um, George Bush, Barack Obama, Vladimir Putin. Just those names are going to incite things with people. These are
Hmm.
divisive things.
Right,
CNN,
devices, but
Fox
yeah.
News,
Yeah.
they're all listed.
Hmm.
Nescafe, I don't know why it's just not Nestle. Maybe because Nescafe is a little easier to get on there. But Nestle, if you're not aware of why that's like a really divisive thing,
Yeah.
take a look at water rights and everything. So it's just a really bizarre thing. Now, most all of these notes are found in Pennsylvania. However, some of the more southern ones are dipping down into Maryland.
Yep.
So the reports are that they're as far east as just west of Philadelphia, and they're supposedly as far west as Johnstown, Pennsylvania, which isn't that far away from us. Now,
Hmm.
one of the really interesting things. Oh, real quick, I'm just reading some stuff here. So they've also been found, I said cereal boxes, they've also been found specifically in Lucky Charms, sealed boxes of Lucky Charms and Duncan Hines cake mix, but also boxes of Tylenol. And
That's
they've
just
been,
yeah.
yeah, really bizarre. So one of the other bizarre things was when I brought this up to you and you took a quick look around, you said to me, "Hey, I think I may
Yeah.
have. What do you remember?
So
Because you were telling me this
this
would
is
have been around 2015, which
yeah.
is right around when this started, or
Yeah,
at
so
least
I
started to be recognized.
about around then. Yeah. So and the reason I think that, like, and again, like I reached out to one of the two people who I think I was with, and they don't remember it, but they also like wouldn't have. But the reason this struck me is I remember finding a piece of paper in a like a little like plastic like Ziploc bag, hanging from a tree, and it was like white, and it was off of a trail, at a relatively well-traveled trail in one of the major county parks in our area. And I remember going over and like being a naturalist nerd that I am, I see a bag with paper in it on a tree off a trail, and I go, "Oh, that is probably like a protected tree or something. I bet there's some information on that, and I want
And
to
I
read
need to
it."
read it. Yep.
Yeah, like I'm not gonna just walk past it, like I'm gonna secret, I'm like, "Oh, is this a chestnut?" Whatever's going on, I'm interested. I remember like tromping over and everything and looking at the bag and seeing a bunch of like just like language that sounded like conspiratorial stuff. And like I get real weirded out about those things. I remember seeing it and just being like, oh, like I'm not touching this. Like I didn't even want to touch it. I was just like, ugh. I don't know if it's someone
I
being,
don't know because you know
yeah.
me, I would have taken that and it would have been
Oh,
my
yeah.
Bible.
You've been waving it from the rooftops, yeah. But so it's one of those things where again, like my initial reaction is like if they were trying to weird people out, then mission accomplished because I was officially weirded out by it.
Yeah.
Enough that I remembered it because this would have been like I said, this is quite some time ago.
The better part
Um,
of 10 years ago.
yeah, exactly. I think it was like 2015, 2016. So yeah, I may have come across one of these, but again, I haven't been able to corroborate it. I have a text out to my other friend. She hasn't gone back to me yet, but I will report back if she is able to confirm that.
Yeah. So the biggest thing is, again, this is an ongoing thing. Obviously, the Reddit community has been tracking this. And
Mm-hmm.
if history tells us anything, it's those folks that get really deep
Mm-hmm.
usually yield some answers.
Yeah, if there's an answer to be found, they'll probably find
Right.
it.
Exactly.
Seriously.
So we will kind of keep going with this, but as to you, I think that if it was exactly as you described, because we all know our memories are good, but they're
Right.
not fallible.
Right.
I think you may have legitimately come across one, or we have to assume that there's going to be some people that are doing copycat stuff here.
Right. Or just adjacent stuff. Like maybe this is a thing that people do. I don't know. Like,
But with the range that this person has,
mm-hmm.
because we can assume that there might be multiple people involved. That's not inconceivable, but it could also be just
Mm-hmm.
one person.
Right. Right.
The fact that we're going just right outside the Philadelphia area and all the way to Johnstown, again, this occurred, what you experienced was in Allegheny County. That's
Mm-hmm.
the county where
Right.
Pittsburgh's at.
Yeah.
That's not that crazy to think that they would have made that drive. If
Right.
they're already in the Poconos to Johnstown, what's an hour from Johnstown to Pittsburgh or the hour and a half, whatever
At
it
that
is?
point, yeah. Like
Exactly. This is not crazy because the Poconos to Johnstown is like 3.5, maybe 4 hours.
bit of a hike. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So again, if now let me ask you this, and I mean this sincerely, and you can't know exactly
Mm-hmm.
how you responded, but had you been aware of this phenomenon,
Mm-hmm.
would you have taken the note to
I
or would you just document it on the site?
I would have just documented it. I wouldn't have touched it. Like, and that's I know part of that's just me being like real weird about stuff, but like I wouldn't have even have wanted to like physically interact with it because like I don't know what the intentions of that person are, and I just don't even want to mess with it. Like that's just me personally.
Well,
But I would
I mean, I
but I
kind
would
of
have
get
made sure
it.
but I would have made sure that people knew about it. I would have like, because
Now, this has nothing to do with the mystery, though.
mhm.
But see, I'm gonna argue against your stance,
Yeah, no,
not because I
please.
don't think it's valid, and I understand you feeling uncomfortable with it because, like you said, a person's intention, and who knows if they're not watching from nearby
Or
and
just
waiting
whatever.
to
Yeah.
see.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's all real and well, but if you're really worried about the thing itself, what if a kid or somebody who's already on the edge? Because remember, okay, so here's the problem. There's like I think I've said something about this before. Like with the Epstein stuff.
Mm-hmm.
If that was like your first time, like that was a real thing.
Yeah.
And that's like there are real consequences. Well, there are a lot of people not facing but the bottom line is like there are real maneuvers taking place there to do some really diabolical things, or the FBI's investigation into the gymnastics issues and everything.
Mm-hmm.
Like this, there's really
There's
nasty
bad stuff
stuff.
out there.
There's
There's bad
really
stuff. There's
nasty
real
stuff.
bad stuff out there. Yeah.
Okay. So if somebody, what if somebody is already on edge,
Mm-hmm.
gets that, and the next thing you know, because it's hard to differentiate sometimes what is real and what's not. So remember
Mm-hmm.
there was that guy that stormed the pizza place?
Well, right. Yeah.
What if somebody on edge were to get that, and how would that make them respond?
Yeah. No, exactly. No, and that's why, like, knowing what I know now, I probably would have contacted the park ranger too. I'm like, hey, there's some like weird thing out here. Because like I
There you
like
go.
plus like you don't want a kid finding it, or
Right,
like
because
I don't
even
know,
just
it's just,
because as a parent,
right, yeah,
I'd
right,
be like, oh, I don't want to have this. This is going to be like way much to explain. Like, what is this?
right.
Some people are just insane, or
Well,
some people
exactly.
just like
Yeah.
doing, sometimes your father sends out really bizarre postcards to strangers.
That's the thing is like I do think that like the idea of performance art in public is like a worthwhile, like as if that's what it
I
is.
agree.
Like again, I don't like,
Yeah,
I
but
think
we
it
came out to the park today so that I wouldn't have to talk to you about how the world is being run
right.
by, Nestle
Yeah,
or whatever.
right. So like that's where I'm like, like I don't know, like is the social contract being upheld or not right now? I'm not sure. Yeah, but it is just it's a weird thing, and like the reason why I think it's worth talking about and making sure that people are aware of is like I didn't know it was as big of a thing as it was until years and years later, and even then it was kind of only in passing, and then you brought it back up, and I was like started looking into it again. I'm like, oh geez, this really is a big thing. Um, and like this is like that like modern folklore stuff that we talk about. It's where this is on the other side of that spectrum from like creepypasta Slender Man stuff, where it's like, yeah,
Absolutely.
this is stuff that is happening out in the world that years from now could end up being, stories that tell us things about, our culture in this time
Yeah,
for
because
for
like
one reason or
crop
another.
circles, we
Yeah.
know we know crop circles were initiated by a group of people out in Britain. They owned up to it. They were able to demonstrate how they did it. They were able to demonstrate how they do it under the cover of darkness. People could not differentiate between theirs and those that people claimed were from aliens.
Hmm.
There's something performance art about it. Okay,
Yeah.
sure, they're damaging
Crops.
agriculture,
Yeah.
but even though it definitely wasn't aliens, and I'm amazed at the people that continue to pretend that it is, it does still say something.
Yeah, no, it does. And I think that like this is and I mean this is me getting into like the weird, so the real weird side of this stuff. But like with like the creepypasta stuff, especially with like Slender Man, we know like on the one side of things, we have those like those poor girls that
That
like
breaks
that
my heart.
yeah, just awful stuff. And like that's like the real effects of those things. But when it comes to like the paranormal report side of these things, not even Slenderman, but let's look at the Rake, something like that. The Rake is a creepypasta that came from Reddit and everything. Um, and it was definitely from you know, a edited trail cam photo is what everything started with.
Yeah, we can
Um,
trace the
yeah,
origin.
we know where it started. But that being said, then you have people over the next X amount of years since that start reporting interactions with these like pale crawler type things. And you start having to ask yourself, like, okay, well, why are people having these experiences now? You know?
And this is exactly what the lake monster stuff is for me.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
again, Not to, but when you listen to Hemlocks and Hellbenders, you'll hear me go off
Yeah,
about how, again,
yeah,
we have so many man-made
yeah.
lakes that claim,
Hmm.
purport to have lake monsters.
Yeah.
Who is stalking lake monsters in our man-made lake?
Hmm. No,
But it's
exactly.
kind of like the rake thing.
Yeah, no, it's similar because I think people are having these interactions, but like, are these like, is there something out there that these people are seeing that, because again, we all get caught up in the mechanism of these things, but like, is there something that is almost taking that image and using that on occasion? Are we projecting those things out in some way? I know it's real woo and real metaphysical, but it's at least, I think, interesting to ask the questions, because like something that is as established as like the rake or a pale crawler, like again, we can find the post where it started. like
Yeah,
like it's
Patient Zero has been well
yeah,
documented.
yeah. So like, why are people still having these interactions? And I
Because
don't,
there's a lot of haunted people.
right. Well, I think that's what it comes down to. I think you're honestly right. And like, I think that's kind of the uncomfortable truth about it, because again, it says more about us than it does about whatever's out there in the
Right.
woods at night.
Not only do we create characters, but we breathe life into them and we
Hmm.
perpetuate our creations. This is kind of, and I've talked about this before, of the cornerstone of the Neo-Aristotelian view
Hmm.
on language, where language creates reality.
Yeah.
Well, here you go. There are people now that have done very real, benign, and terrible things
Hmm.
because of the creation of a Slender Man. That's not saying that the person that created that
Hmm.
has any responsibility for
Right.
how people took that belief. But again, we create things, we give it life, we perpetuate things. There's a lot of characters that could be defined this way. But this whole Schuylkill Note thing to me is just really interesting because there's somebody who seems to be capable
Hmm.
getting around of doing something consistently, of having an aim, even if it's just
Hmm.
really random, even if it's just a performance art thing, even if it's just somebody having a laugh at doing a weird thing.
Yeah.
So the fact that it's ongoing like this, the fact that we don't know anything except for where these notes are popping up, it's extremely interesting to me. It's going to be interesting to see how these evolve, how these
Right.
grow in their life. And if you have any stories of, have you found one of these? Have you got a friend that's seen one of these? I want to see one of these. How did people show us?
Yeah, so you can find us on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube at the Ghost Furnace Podcast, or you can just send us an email at the Ghost Furnace Podcast at gmail.com.